So I know that they did show the documentary I Lived on Parker Avenue already. Can you raise your hand if you were here and you saw that? Awesome. How many of you saw LifeMark already? Wow. Okay. That lets me curve my speech a little bit. So I'm going to just touch on a few things with I Lived on Parker and LifeMark and touch on a couple of other things then. So as y'all know, when I was 18 years old, I found myself in an unplanned pregnancy. And at the time, I was, you got to think, I'm much older now. I won't give away my age, but they didn't have Starbucks on every corner, and we didn't have resources at our fingertips. So back then, either you parented or you gave a child up before it becomes a baby. Knowing now, of course, obviously it's a baby at moment of conception. When you go into an abortion center, or facility, I should say, they protect you when you go in. So as I was walking into the facility, as you saw on the documentary, I put a blanket over my head, a radio here, to try to drown out the noise from the sidewalk advocates. But this one lady, her voice said, "Your baby's got 10 fingers and 10 toes. Please don't kill it." But I proceeded on inside the facility anyhow. And as I went into the facility, everything's quick, hurry, because they don't want you to change your mind. So I get in, and I sign a little piece of paper, and the nurse rushes me back to my room. And on my way back to the room, all I could see down the hallway, and some of the doors were cracked, and you could see in the rooms, is you could see a bunch of women that were all looking like this. Just really sad, pale, depressed, very oppressed, and it felt evil. Not the women in the rooms, but the place itself felt evil. I continued on inside into my room, and the nurse hands me a gown and says, "Put this on, take this pill, and lie on that table." Yes, ma'am. That's how I grew up. Yes, ma'am, no, ma'am. So I went into my room, got my gown on, took my blue pill, and I sat on this table. And the reason why I'm repeating some of this is because the film nor the movie goes into all of it. So as I was on the table, my head kept falling to the right because there wasn't anything else to look at. So I could see my reflection in the cart. And they didn't have any cute puppies or kittens on the wall. Definitely no resources, nothing to look at. So as I'm lying on this cold silver table, my head keeps falling to the right, and I keep hearing that voice, 10 fingers, 10 toes. And if God wasn't gracious enough with that, I hear an audible voice, and this voice says, "Get up. Get up. It's not too late." And I'm thinking, man, what kind of pill did they just give me, right? And seconds later, the abortionist walks in. What, babe? Is it too far? Is that better? Sorry, y'all. And now you sidetracked my train of thought. Thank you. So then the abortionist comes in, doesn't speak, comes in, washes his hands, puts his gloves on, sits on this tiny little stool, silver stool, slides over to me, grabs a cart off the instrument tray, and I don't know which instrument it was, and he taps the stirrups because apparently my feet weren't in there properly. Right as his hand with the instrument brushes my left leg, I sat up and I said, I can't do this. And instead of him saying, "Well, that's great. Hey, let me have a nurse come in, go over other options that are available," he got angry. I wouldn't understand that until years later. He stood up, ripped his gloves off, turned around, was walking out the door, put his foot on the trash can, dropped the gloves, never looking back at me, and no one ever came back in the room. So I got dressed as quickly as I could and went out the first exit door I could find. Now, they don't protect you when you leave. So as I was leaving, a lot of the advocates were saying horrible things like baby murderer and some other choice words. That being said, I want to say this. Training has come a long way. And I don't consider them protesters. They are sidewalk advocates who I hold very deeply to my heart. And they go through a lot of intensive training. and things are a lot different now. And I just kind of want to put that out there. Are there any sidewalk advocates in the room? Can you raise your hand? Can you stand up? Would you please? Y'all do so much work, more than you will ever truly know until you get to heaven. Because if it wasn't for y'all, and God, of course, my birth son would probably not be here. And honestly, I don't know that I would be here. And I will never be able to thank y'all enough. I love y'all so much. Thank you. So I exit out the abortion facility. I get into the car as quickly as I can, and we're on our way home. I wait a little bit before I work up the nerve to say I couldn't go through with it. And the response I get is, what? What do you mean? What do you mean you couldn't go through with it? I just gave you $200. I just sold my radio so we could get an abortion. What are you going to do now? As though this is all my fault, right? And when I look back and I think about that day as years have gone by, I think, wow, the price of my birth son's head was the price of a boombox radio. And that really put that into perspective for me. So we get back home and unsure what we're going to do at this point. And I get blessed with a UTI infection. And I know a lot of people will be like, what do you mean you were blessed with a UTI infection? But it's true. Because while I was at the hospital, I asked the doctor, I said, so if I tell you something, I said, you can't tell anyone, correct? And he said, that's correct. So I told him the situation I was in. He goes, let me get your medication, and I'm going to have a social worker come in. Her name is Rhonda, by the way. She came in, and I told her the situation, and she said, had you ever considered adoption? And I look at her with kind of a funny look. I mean, give my baby away to somebody I don't even know? She goes, but hun, think about where you were just at. She goes, that's usually 99% certain death, and look, you still have life. And I said, just give me a little time to think about it. I go back home, I speak to the birth father about it, and we both agreed that that would be in the best interest of everyone. So then comes the time for picking the baby's mom and dad. And I start getting connected with Kirsch and Kirsch PC. And you got to remember, this is coming from an 18-year-old. And they're like, you're about ready to receive some Dear Mom letters. I'm like, what the heck is a Dear Mom letter? And they go, these are families looking to adopt. They're going to send you their stories. And I thought, okay. Soon after, my mailbox was getting bombarded with all these stories, but they all read the same. We do this, we don't do that. We never miss church on Sunday. Now, I wasn't looking for perfection. I was just looking for someone that would do the things with him that I wanted to do, like going fishing, going mudding, a lot of the outside activities that you saw on the video. And one day, I go to the mailbox, and there's one single letter. And I had excitement over this letter, and I couldn't understand why. I hadn't even opened it yet. I start tearing into this letter, and I start reading the story of the Scottons. And she was sharing from her heart. There wasn't no front, trying to be perfect. And she had lost two sons. Her mom had lost 4. There was a death gene in their family. They didn't want to try to have any more children. So adoption was their only option in order to complete their family. So a lot of people are already moms and dads. They're just moms and dads waiting for the completion of their family. So I had one question, though. And I looked over at the birth father. I said, I got to talk to them. He goes, are you sure you're allowed to do that? I said, yeah, I can do that through the adoption company. So they set up the phone call. Phone rings. Susan answers, and she says, hello. Really sweet voice. It was so cute. And I said, Susan, this is Melissa. I have one question for you. And she goes, okay. I said, how do y'all bait your hook down there? Dead silent in what seemed like forever. She finally responds and says, well, we take the hook and we bait it straight through the eyes. That's just how we've always done it. And I said, oh, well, That's really great. Congratulations, you're a mom. Click. I don't know what she was doing on her end. So obviously fishing is very close to my heart. But I wanted someone that I knew that would be a hands-on mom. And I didn't want him shipped off to boarding school and all that. I wanted someone that would interact with him as I would. So his family is chosen. Day of delivery comes. But one thing I haven't told you, and it's not said in the documentary or the movie, is I've been pretty much the same height and weight most of my life, give or take 7 pounds here and there. And I never showed for 9 months. He was a secret for 19 years. I never told a living soul, not my mom, not my dad, not a best friend, nobody, until I met my husband, Sean. I walked into the hospital in my blue jeans, walked out in my blue jeans. I kid you not. And people look at me and go, now, wait a minute. How in the world is that even possible? And the only thing I can think of is referring to a biblical story. And that's when David was running from Saul. And he went and he hid in a cave. And he had once asked God, now, I'm not a preacher, and it's not going to be in preacher terms, so forgive me for this, but he didn't like spiders, kind of like me, David didn't. He says to God, what's up with these spiders? They're not good for anything. God says, one day you will thank me for this creature. That day came when he was in the cave, because the soldiers checked all the caves except for one. The only one they didn't check was the one David was in, because a spider had weaved a web over that cave, and the soldiers go, oh, no one's been in there for years. And so they skipped that cave, and it spared David's life that day. And so in my opinion, God put cobwebs over everybody else's eyes so I could get through what I needed to get through at that time. So I go into the hospital, and I'm by myself. And I call Rhonda. I don't know it's her birthday. I wouldn't know that till years later. I say, I'm by myself. I'm scared. Would you come be with me? Click, she hangs up the phone on me. She was there in no time. Stayed with me all the way through. I get through the delivery. I deliver this beautiful, healthy baby boy. And you would think I'm all excited, yes? And she looks at me and says, are you ready to hold your son? And I look at her and I say, no. And she says, Melissa, if you don't do this, you will regret this the rest of your life. I promise you. This is something you really need to do. So I asked her to give me a little bit of time. And one of the reasons, I grew up very much a tomboy, and so I was always kind of rough around the edges. And people would give me their baby, and they're like, do you want to hold my baby? Well, what are you supposed to say? No. So, they give me their baby, and I'm sitting there, and I'm holding the baby, and I'm pregnant with my baby, and no one knows it. And she's like, Melissa, he's not a football. And I'm thinking, I can't hold my baby. I can't hold anybody's baby. Blah, 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 blah. And so she comes in a few moments later, and she lays my birth son right here on this arm. And it was the most natural thing ever. So she leaves us alone and gives us some alone time. I'm looking down at him. I know you. I love you. And we're looking at each other deeply, eye to eye. I know babies can't see real well. And no matter what anybody in the room says, he smiled at me and it wasn't gas. And so I get brave and I stand up with my son. And I walk over to the window. Now, I'm not saved at this time. Now, I knew that there was God, but that doesn't mean anything. Even Satan knows there's God. Knowing God and living for God are two very different things. So I get up and I'm standing at the window and I'm holding my son, and I look out the window and I just simply say, Lord, if you're there, please watch out for my son. And the door opens and it's Rhonda. So she came in, placed my son in my arm. Now she's coming in and she's taking my son. So I'm about to do the most unnatural thing on the planet for any parent to do, because when we have a child, it's our natural instinct to guard and protect that child with everything, including our own life. But sometimes You're in a situation where you have to be the mom that can let go to the mom that can't let go. And that's what I had to do for him, not for me, but for him. So she comes in, and I hand my son over to her, and my heart just sinks. And then it comes time for me to leave the hospital without my son. So again, another very unnatural feeling. And I try to go and live my life as though nothing ever happened. And when I did that, I had a lot of anger, a lot of jealousy, a lot of resentment toward the adoptive parents. I'm sorry to say that, but it's true. It's real life. It's not Skittles and rainbows. I know the documentary and the movie both portray it as Skittles and rainbows, but it's not. But you know what? It's okay. And it's okay because God gave us those emotions. And if you didn't feel that, I think I would be more concerned if you didn't have some of those feelings than to say, oh, yeah, it's no big deal. He's got his family. I'm going on with my life. No, it shows you're human. And that's okay. It's okay to not be okay. And someone said there's a book called that it really is. It's okay to not be okay. But one thing that I hope that someone will do, and this is not something I have the power to do or the desire to do. I've got too many projects going on, but something I think would be a really good idea, so I'm just putting it out there for someone, is when a woman goes through this or a family goes through this, that maybe there's some counseling that she has like right there at her fingertips, because I think that would have been a huge blessing for me. And I think that that would have helped me heal a little bit better and maybe a little bit quicker. So maybe there's something out there that I don't know about. And if there is, I apologize. But I think that when adoption is involved, I just think counseling is something that would be very beneficial to a lot of people. That being said, 19 years later, I'm going to get to meet my birth son. I'm all excited. He's fine. We've been talking for a year just on Facebook. He's all grown up. I'm thinking, we're going to have this big, great reunion. Until a year later, he finally says, I'm ready to meet. And I go, yes. And then he goes, but Louisiana Right to Life would like to film it. What? No. And I say to my husband, I don't want to do that. He says, but babe. And I get a lot of but babes. If it even helps one person, is it not worth it? I said, but I'm going to be ugly crying. People's going to see me at my most vulnerable, my weakest, my ugliest. He said, they're going to see the beauty of adoption. So I say yes, the power of yes, which I'm going to talk about briefly in a second. So I say yes to the documentary. Documentary comes out, and I had been praying. I had been praying for the Lord. I felt like I was clocking in my job, doing my time, clocking out, coming home, cooking dinner, taking a bath, doing the same thing over and over, like probably a lot of people feel. And I said, Lord, I'm bored. I want to change a life. I want a career. I want something different. I want to travel the world. I want to meet different cultures. I want to meet everybody. Not asking too much, right? Oh, be careful what you ask for. Because I would, not long after that, get a phone call from somebody with documentary. He calls me and says, hey, Melissa, Fox and Friends would like you, David and Susan, to come on the program and talk about adoption. I said, you mean in person? He says, yeah. I said, you mean in front of 1.5 million people? He says, yeah. I said, oh, I don't think I can do that. Sean says, but babe, if it even helps one person. Oh. And before I got off the phone call and had said yes to that, he goes, oh, and by the way, the Maria Regina High School would like you to come and talk to the junior class the day before you go on TV. I said, you mean in person? He goes, yeah. I said, in front of the whole class? Yeah. I don't think I could do that, Sean. But babe, what if there's one girl in that audience that you've talked to, that you've touched? So somebody asked me earlier, how did you get into speaking? And when I say I was pushed into it, I'm not kidding. When I was at the Maria Regina High School, they knew that there was going to be a Q&A. after they watched the documentary, but they didn't know I was there. So I was behind the curtain. I said to Sean, look out the curtain. What are them girls doing? He goes, well, they're all crying. And I said, well, that's a good thing, right? That means they're interested. He goes, yeah, that's good. And then all of a sudden, Cecilia says, okay, y'all were going to do a Q&A. But I think I've got somebody that can better answer your questions. Melissa, come on out. Those girls just stood up and was screaming and crying. And our friend, who is a brother to me and Sean, kissed me right here on the side of my face. And he literally pushes me. And I come out like this. Any questions? And they all start raising their hands. So it was my first time, and all I did was a Q&A. And it went beautifully. And this one girl stood up. And my heart starts pounding because I could tell that she was a pro-choice person. I just knew it. And she stood up. And she goes, I want to tell you something. I thought, Lord, help me have the right words. Let me have the right words. She said, when I came in here today, I knew that this was going to be a message about life, and it's my body, my choice. She said, I've always felt that way. I felt that way when I came in here today, but I want to tell you something. After listening to you up here speaking today, I no longer feel that. I am now about saving the babies. I am pro-life, and I am proud. Cecilia comes up to me afterwards. Kids are missing their buses. I'm signing autographs. It's a really good day. And she gives me a hug. And I never said this to anybody else except my husband. She said, I think you just found your new career. And I'm like, oh, thanks, but no thanks. And then she looks at me like this and she goes, we'll see. I don't know what she knew, but that was pretty wild. But so that began me going out, speaking on behalf of, I lived on Parker Avenue, which I think the thing I love the most about this documentary is it's not my story. It's not David's story. It's not the Scotton story. It's all of our stories. You have 3 powerful stories all wrapped up into one. And that's what makes it so beautiful and so impactful is you get the insight of all 3. And that's so powerful and such a useful tool at schools and pregnancy centers, any type of resource centers. So I'm just really, really super proud. That being said, I had sent a documentary to Kirk Cameron, not once, but twice. Not because I'm a crazy fangirl, which is probably what he thought at the time, but because I thought, man, if I could get Kirk Cameron to say one good thing about the documentary, maybe I could expand my speaking platform, yes? Never heard anything. But the way God works, this is funny. One of Kirk Cameron's friends saw the documentary, knew it was close to his heart, sent the documentary to Kurt and said, you got to watch this. Kurt Cameron watches it, falls in love with the documentary, takes it to the Kendrick brothers, says, I'm thinking about doing a movie. What do y'all think? They said, not only do we like it, we love it, and we want to be part of it. Hence the movie LifeMark. It was supposed to play 7 days, played 7 weeks, hit number 2 in the nation, and is now in several countries that I can't even pronounce. And on a personal note, I've always wanted to be an actress as a growing up and being in high school, taking drama, all that. But, I was beat down my whole life until I met my husband, Sean. And, I was told I was a stupid little country girl and it doesn't happen for people like me. So I kind of put that on the back burner. Well, when LifeMark came out, I was blessed enough to be on the set. And I got to do 2 cameo appearances. It relit that fire in me I had as a teen. And so after that, I looked over at Alex Kendrick and I said, Alex? And he said, yes, ma'am. I said, and we're like brother and sister, love him so much. I was like, what do you think? You think I'm too old to start this? And he said, nope. He said, I think you'd be a great actress and a great producer. And I thought, well, he's probably just being kind. So I auditioned for my first role in Disciples of the Moonlight. 23,000 people auditioned. I got the role. I thought it was a one-time thing. And I thought, oh, wow, well, this is great. I'm just going to audition for my next movie, right? Boy, was I wrong. Audition, audition, audition. No, 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 no. We need green eyes. We need blue eyes. We need blonde hair. We need this. And I'm sitting there thinking, oh, good grief. You get told no more than anything else in the world, right? But I don't like the word no. So no fuels me instead of making me stop. I was dating someone before my husband, and he was going to work one day, and he's like, don't get on this dirt bike. Now, had he said, now, Melissa, I'm going to go to work. The brakes are not working on this. Please don't get on the dirt bike. I wouldn't have got on the dirt bike. He pulls out of the driveway, straight through the drywall. Yeah, don't tell me no unless you give me a good explanation as to why. There's always a way around it, is my way of thinking. There's always a way to work around it. I want to share a little story here. It's a very short story. You know, you've always heard the saying that God left the 99 to save one, right? It never really sunk into me, the meaning of that, until something similar happened. Now, I am not comparing myself to the Lord, for the record. But in 1 week, 2 days in a row, there was a baby that was saved from abortion, and I was on cloud nine. I was so happy. I mean, you couldn't knock me down for nothing. The very next day, I lost one. She went through with the abortion. I was devastated. It took me a long time to kind of deal with that. And I kept asking myself, God, what did I do wrong? What could I have done? What could I have said differently? What did I do wrong? Why couldn't I save the one? One. And that verse came to me. I left 99 to save one. We can't save everybody yourself. It takes a team. But that has just stuck with me ever since then. And something else I'd like to touch on here before we start getting ready to close is, and I'm not trying to ruffle any feathers, but it's probably going to ruffle a little bit. But don't worry, Doe, it's nothing too bad. So when you hear the term love them both, it sounds great. And I support that. I do. However, what's missing? When you say love them both, what's missing? Anybody? Thank you. Amen. The dads. Where are the men's voices in this? A lot more men have been stepping up. A lot more men have been saying, you know, I wanted to have that baby, but my wife, my fiance, my girlfriend, my daughter, she got an abortion anyway. Where was my right? I would have taken care of that baby. I've heard many women come to me and say, well, you know, if the father would have, you know, said that he would support me, then I would never have went through with it. And I don't know the statistics, so I don't want to give it to you and misspeak, but it's very high. It's over 50% that go in and say, if the father would have supported me, I would never have went through with it. And here's one thing that we want to erase men. We want no men to say this anymore. In theory, it sounds really good. And I know that when men say it, they mean it from their heart in a good way. But when you say, I will support you no matter what, never say that again. Because when you say that, you are saying to that woman, if you decide to abort, I will support you. If you decide to have the child, I will support you. But you're giving her permission. You're giving her permission to take the life of your child. And a lot more fathers are stepping up. I've got a good friend named Elliot Cohn he's with Expectant Fathers Without Voices. He tries to advocate for men. There's a lot of men's groups out there now. So men, I want to come to you and just kind of ask you when you're speaking, and I know this is a little bit more mature crowd, that we want to really bleed this into this next generation and get rid of that line and replace that line. Okay, I've been warned that my time is about up. So real quick, I am working on my nonprofit, which is called Life Stories Matter. And when I say life stories matter, that means all stories. It's not just abortion. It's not just adoption. It could be addiction. It could be PTSD. Every person sitting inside this audience, I don't care who you are or what you say, every single person has a story, period. And people say, well, how did you get through some of your toughest times? I journaled. That's how I dealt with a lot of my issues. So with Life Stories Matter, it's going to be part of a program coinciding with my book, which is out front for pre-sale orders. If anyone's interested, for $18.99, and you will get a signed copy the week of October 25th. But had to get the plug in there. So it's going to all tie into Life Print. And you're going to read my story. It's gritty because it's not Skittles and rainbows, but it's going to be a story about redemption, love, forgiveness, and how God never wavered throughout everything I've been through in my life. The next part will be Life Print, the journal, journaling through your pain. Part 3 and the final will be a writing prompt book to help you tell your story and take it to a ghostwriter and say, hey, I want to tell my story. Take it to a documentary and say, hey, I want a documentary. Take it to a movie place, say, I want to do a movie. This to help you tell your story, because as soon as you tell your story, that is when your healing begins. That's where it began for me. Time is up. Oi, I love y'all so much. Thank you for having me tonight. I really appreciate it. Have a good night.